Hey students, and welcome back to our next session on making inferences. So we are going to have a slideshow that's going to take you through some of the things that we already know, but maybe it's going to be presented in a different way to where you're hopefully able to really start being able to grasp the idea of what it means to make an inference. So if you haven't done so already, make sure you have your notes ready to go. Again, computer, paper, and pen, doesn't matter. What works for you works for me. All right? So let's get started. All right, an inference. An inference is a conclusion reached on the basis of evidence and reasoning. This should sound familiar to you. Evidence, remember our inference chart was in column 1, and reasoning from our brain was in column 2 of all the inference charts that you made for us so far. So, for example, I infer that there is a ghost in my house based on the evidence that I have seen objects moving on their own. So that is what a sentence might sound like if I were telling you about something that I have inferred, okay? Another example. If my best friend stops talking to me, I can infer that he is angry at me or he thinks I'm crazy and doesn't want to be seen with me. When you read, you need to make inferences about things happening in the story. This process will help you write your essay at the end of the unit. So, before you can understand how to write an essay, you need to better understand how to read an essay and how to read good writing. And part of that is going to come from you inferencing why the author made choices that he or she made. So for us, we've been practicing by watching some video clips or short films, and this is an easy way because a lot of us are visual learners, so it's easier to see something and make an inference because, facial expressions and body language, they're so telling, and we practice that every single day without knowing it. So when we shift that to text, it may be a little bit more difficult, but only because you have to think about it a little bit harder. But rest assured, an author will always make sure that there are clues in order to allow you to infer something. So let me read this example for you. Let me move myself out of the way, put it up here so you can see. If I read that the main character hates old people, but then later becomes friends with an old person, I can infer that a theme of this story relates to challenging your prejudices. Why? Why can I infer that? Well, if I'm reading a story and I see a character so strong in their beliefs because the author tells me that or shows me that based on their actions, and then later down the road in the story, those actions are completely different from the beginning of the story, then what I'm starting to think about is some type of growth or change. And so this is when our themes come into play, right? There has to be a reason why this character grew or made these changes in their feelings or their way of life, okay? So for this example, I'm going to infer that a theme might be challenging prejudices, specifically for this character as it relates to their feelings about old people and how they have changed throughout the story. An inference is not based solely on your opinion. It is based on evidence. That can be easier said than done because a lot of times it's quick to come up with an opinion based on our feelings or our emotions, but it's important that we are logical and that we have reason, and that is what comes from evidence. And so when we are talking about literature, we're talking about text evidence, but there's also evidence in your everyday life, right? So use that evidence. In a story, everything you read in text, what characters say, what they do, any events that are happening, this can all be used as your evidence, as your basis for making an inference, and it should be used. So down here you'll see the text says the main character hates old people. Therefore, I can infer that the main character has a mean and or childish personality. So I'm using what I've been given, what the text says, in order to lead to what my inference is. Okay? Sorry, I'm going to keep moving my video so you can see. So things that you can make an inference about, specifically in relation to literature. So there's character development. So how a character's personality or motivation or attitude changes throughout the course of a story is known as character development. So you've probably learned in your English class prior to this about characterization. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about character development. So an author is going to create a character and paint them in a certain light so that you can feel some type of way about that character. Now, sometimes characters remain stagnant through a story. They don't change much. And other times they change drastically. That would be character development. So we're developing these characters based on their actions, their thoughts, what they say, in order for you as the reader to have a feeling and be able to infer things about that character. So then there's also themes. We talked a little bit about themes on the last slide. So what messages or morals are revealed to us as the readers over the course of the story. So when we made that inference about the theme, you should be doing that as you're reading. You should be thinking to yourself, when something changes, like with a character, for instance, you should be thinking, oh, I wonder if the message or the moral of this story is challenging prejudices, like we said before. So another factor here is symbols. So think about what things in the story represent or symbolize and how those symbols are developed over the course of the story. Lastly, plot. So how the author develops, progresses, and resolves conflicts over the course of the story. So these are just things that you can think about while you are reading, and while you are doing so, you're naturally going to be having moments in your head where you're inferring. Your challenge is to start thinking about what you are doing when you're making an inference and put pen to paper so that you can sort of objectify what's already happening naturally in your brain. And the inference chart that we've used before is a great way to do that. So if you can get into the habit of making observations and pairing them with your reasoning, your schema, and then making an inference, that's how you can rest assured that you're adding your logic, you're adding your reasoning, your evidence, and making a proper inference. Okay. Making an inference can be thought of as reading between the lines of whatever you read or whatever you observe. So we've seen images like this in our other videos. So you have clues from a book or our evidence, and then you've got all these things in your brain. And so the clues in the book plus your own thinking or what you already know equals an inference. So you've seen this before. As an activity, make inferences based on evidence in images and text. Excuse me. So open your journal and you'll title it Making Inferences, which is what we've been doing a lot of, so you probably already have a lot of notes on this. And then you'll answer some of the following questions. So get ready. Put this down here. What can you infer about this character's personality? So just take a quick look, take a couple seconds. What are you thinking about this character? Look at what you see, what you read. Okay, jot down some things you might infer, and we'll move on. I'm going to help you out with this one. So, oh, you'll see the question up here change. So what evidence is your inference based on? So make sure you have evidence. So our inference might be something like this. The woman is jealous and very emotional. Well, I need to have evidence to back that up. My evidence is that I think she's jealous because she's upset to see a couple kissing. Presumably she would rather be kissing the man. I think she's very emotional. She's a very emotional person because she's crying. So my evidence for me saying that she's emotional is because I see tears running down her face. My evidence for thinking she might be jealous is because I can see in the reflection of her glasses that there is a man and a woman kissing. So if she's having an emotional reaction, I'm guessing that there's some type of connection there that's making her emotional or maybe jealous. Now remember, there's not really a right or wrong. That could be nothing. That could be completely not what the author was going for, but it's what I inferred based on my experiences and the evidence that I was given. So yours may have been different. All right, let's try another one. So what can you infer about this character's personality? So you've got this guy here, and then these guys. So just take a look. Look at everything you can see. I have feasted on the nectars of wild fruit in the land of the Norns. I have dined in the exalted halls of the godly realms. This day I am offered a creamsicle. Okay, so think about what you can infer. Now get some evidence. Okay, jot those down. We're going to move on to the next one. All right. Moving on. What can you infer about this character's personality? So it says, I finally understood why my sisters so honored the sea. I never took her for granted again. When I was injured after my confrontation with Ares, it was the sea who healed me. I owe her my life. Put this here. Again, what evidence is your inference based on? So guys, by this time, this is literally asking you to fill out the left column, your inference chart that we've been using. So your first column, what are you seeing? Make sure you have evidence and then make your inference. So all this is doing is just guiding you through filling out that inference chart. Okay, let's do another one. What can you infer about the personalities of both characters? So keyword both. So you have Spider-Man here. But if it's a fight you want, I'll show you that Spider-Man isn't exactly a weakling either. And then you have this guy over here. I'm not big into superheroes, so I don't know who this is, but it says thud. So pay attention to the body language here, the use of onomatopoeia, the language, and make an inference about these characters. Then, of course, it's asking you for your evidence, so make sure you have evidence. Okay. What can you infer about the relationship between these characters? So look at the body language, look at what's happening. This says, did you do your math homework? This says, I'm taking a break. This says, what did I say about reading that crap? This says, it's not crap, Mom, I'm reading. This is reading. So think about what this scene here might say about their relationship, and then of course include your evidence. What can you infer about the situation taking place? What do you think is happening? So look at, you'll see this is a Spider-Man uniform and there's no mask on. It says, my name is Peter Parker. I took most of the photos that go with those articles you saved. So especially if you're into comic books, you'll probably know what's going on with this. Make sure, of course, that you have your evidence. And then we are going to move. So our inference chart looks a little different, but what I'm going to pull up is the exit ticket. So make another inference chart. You know what the inference chart looks like. I'll scroll up so you can see it again. This was one from earlier. By now you know what that looks like. So what you want to do is make another inference chart and you're going to turn to any random channel, okay? Something preferably that you've never watched before. Spend just about 5 or 10 minutes filling out your chart with observations. So fill out the first column, observations, add your schema, and then combine those to make 5 new inferences based on this TV show that hopefully you've never seen. All right, so finish that activity, and then I will see you guys next time. Take care.